Hi, my name's Estee, owner of Austin Bloom, and I welcome you to our DIY Christmas Wreath Kit 2020. Austin Bloom is a creative floristry department, let's say. We've been in business for nearly 7 years now, and throughout the years we've focused on all sorts of floral magic. So anything from teaching, so workshops, daily flowers, weddings and events. And more recently, I've just worked out with now having a family, little Mimi, who's now 2.5, and just realising that it's impossible for me to be able to do all of those elements anymore at this stage, or have a physical shop. So working from home and being able to deliver to you some online teaching is something that I'm very passionate about, and something that I've always been very excited about, is what I'm focusing on at the moment, and starting with the Christmas wreath, being that this is this time of year. The other thing we're also doing this year is some care boxes as well, some care packages that are beautiful gift box that can be sent anywhere around Australia for Christmas. This is the 7th year that we have been running wreath making courses, but this year is a very different experience. We've gone, for ecological reasons, away from Oasis, which is the floral foam we've used in the past, but it doesn't break down. So what we've got is a wire base in your kit, and like a raffia covered wire string, so things that are much more lovely for the environment. So I welcome you to today. I hope that there's a few of you together, or even if you're on your own, I'm just inviting you to make this a really intentional, special time for all of you. A time of meditation, a time to just take yourself into a whole new zone. This is a time of probably 2 hours of creativity, to step back from your busyness of the year, and also the franticness and bizarreness that this year has been. I just hope that this is a time that you can just quieten down and focus wholly and solely on the flowers and your wreath. So welcome to the kit, and I can't wait to teach you what you're about to make. So now is the time to get out your boxes if you haven't already, and you're going to need a little bit of space. So you can't just do this with, next to the person. Well, it wouldn't be COVID safe anyway, would it? But make sure you've got enough room around you, at least kind of a couple of meters per person, or even if you don't have, you just want to be on one table, maybe pop a trestle behind you so you can, put your flowers behind you while you work, because it does get a little bit messy, and dry flowers sometimes get a bit kind of stuck together as well. So it's important to have space around you. So that's number one. And you don't want to feel claustrophobic. You got to be free in your creativity. So opening up your box, this is the best bit, because it's all surprises from here on in, really. So opening up, bit of tissue for a bit of drama. So in your box, it's all very neutral and colour coordinated, which I like. You've got all sorts of things, including a little bag like this one. This has got all the tiny, special little fragile bits in it. And in the big box, we've got anything from your fabric to all of your creative elements. So I'm just going to get everything out, and then I'm going to tell you a little bit about all the elements in your box. So I find it works really, really well to, like I said, maybe keep the fragile things a little bit out of the way, because we don't want them getting caught up in with the larger, heavier items. So layering your flowers in a nice little grouping in front of you, it's just going to help you see what's inside. Take your time doing this. And obviously when you're ready, just pop your box out of the way, so you've got plenty of room to work. If you didn't know this already, all your elements are dryable and everlasting. So 18 months and beyond, you'll keep enjoying your wreaths over the years. Pine cones, beautiful pine cones. all sorts of little hakier nuts. Gum nuts. Okay, we're getting there. This is a big box. Some snips and glue gun if you've ordered those online. Some little cedar roses. These are all the little fun bits. And the wreath base. This bit's the crucial bit. Okay. So you've got your box open and you've laid everything out. So you've got, starting from the start, you've got the bracken fern, which is this one here. You've got Western Australian Morrison, blue gum, fleabane, pussy willow, gum nuts, dried gypsophila, and these ones are bleached varieties. So although everything else is naturally dyed or dried, these ones aren't. So these ones are from Japan or China, and they're actually preserved the real flower, but their chemicals are used to preserve them and to bleach them. So you get these beautiful, crisp white, dried, everlasting flowers. You've got the paper daisies. You've got a little hakia nut, a cedar rose, the good old humble pine cone, and the 3 palms. So this is called a 5-finger palm, a date palm, and a palm heart. So that's the varieties of things in your box. We have really tried to keep things South Australian based, obviously apart from the bleached items that I talked about. And even this one here, the fleabane, from a local grower who recently with the fires, you know, they had serious loss to the point where even finding me some pine cones was harder this year because they lost one of their largest pines. So, you know, it's a serious thing. But she said they used a whole lemon tree's worth of lemons to bleach this fleabane. So it's normally really dark brown, but it's really silvery and beautiful. So, you know, there's a lot of love that goes into these varieties. I also want you to make sure that you refer to your sheets in your box too. So if you forget the names of things and you get a bit confused, you can always go back to your cheat sheet. So that will have on there the flower varieties, but also the tools and sundries that you need to use. So in your little box, in your little bag, you're going to have different things like thick green wires and some white wires. These are particularly useful for the pine cone attachment. So if you can see those there. You've also got what's called the wired string. So we talked a little bit about this before. So really kind of in my introduction when we were talking about using much more, you know, nature happy things. So this is like a silver wire covered in raffia. So if you can see that there, it's really great because you can wind and wind and wind it and get some really good tension for tying on the flowers onto the wreath. So in a minute I'm going to go through the strong techniques that are needed for creating this wreath. So we've got that, we've got more of that because you need it. And also your ribbons. Now they're for right at the end, so you can keep those to one side. Okay, and the other little thing that you will have also found in your kits is some copper wire. So they're beautiful for tying the hakia nuts with a bit of copper wire, but that's at the end. We'll talk about that later. So I think we've been through everything except for your snips and your glue gun. So these, you probably want to get the glue gun on maybe 15-20 minutes into your making. So just to make sure it's nice and hot. So it's kind of the last process, uses the glue gun. And also some good sharp scissors for cutting the ribbon. Okay. All right, we're good to go. So I'm just going to explain to you a little bit about what you're going to make today. So you've got all your ingredients out, you've got your wire base ready, but this is what you're going to be making. So we've got a wreath here that's been pre-made, and I've designed it really in 3 main sections. So you've got your first section, which is clustering really just the bracken fern, a little bit of gum and some gypsophila. So we're just going to be focusing on this in a minute, but I want to show you the whole design. So we've got this first section here is the bracken, through to the gypsophila, through to your hydrangea and pine cone. Now this there with the fabric and the pine cone starts the second section. So this section really up through here is using all the rest of the ingredients, and this is really the creative part. So I would encourage you to kind of spend a little less time on this first section and really get your teeth into this section here that takes you back up to the top. We're always working in one direction, so I'm not using 2 directions, it's just one direction, and your stem will lead you anti-clockwise around the whole design. I've kind of designed this as well for your reference in a clock, if you can imagine a clock. So we're going to be working anti-clockwise, so 12, 9, 6 and 3, and that really gives you an indication of where you're up to by the clock. So and the third and final section is the addition of all your fragile elements with the hot glue gun. So the first 2 sections really are using your wires and your wired string, and the third section is attaching your fragile elements with a hot gun. It can be the straw flowers, the bleached fern, any little florets of hydrangea that you have left, they can all be used too. So like I said, we are starting at the top and working our way back around all in one direction. I also wanted to talk a little bit about always and forever, I've always worked from top left to bottom right and top right to bottom left. So when we use like a cross, like an X really, and you can really work to balancing off each sections. Now this will get a little bit more familiar the further you get along in the design. But now I'm going to show you the techniques for step 1. So for the techniques for stage 1 or step 1, so the first part of the wreath, and really these do extend across the whole wreath, but I just need you to know these straight up. So you've got your wired string, is the raffia covered string in your box. Now to attach the flowers to the wreath base, there's a few techniques, so whichever one feels most comfortable to you. So you can sit the flowers on and really get an idea, yep, I like where that's sitting. Holding the flowers tightly, finding the middle point to your piece of wired string, tie that around, and at this stage I'm not knotting, I'm just continuing to wrap all the way around the wired base, and I've done that about 3 times. I come up and I tie it off like I would tie off a bread tie. So, and you can do that several times. Do you feel confident that that is totally secure? Another technique, grabbing your bunch together. So at this stage, like this is what's called clustering. So if I refer to clustering, that's when I'm adding a few flowers together and putting them in one position. So another piece of wired string, this is a second technique, so you can use whichever one feels most comfortable. Get the flower stems into the center of the string, again wrapping around, so one around that way, one around that way. So I've really tied it off like a posy, so if you can see that, laying it onto the wreath base, and again tying all the way around the wreath base. So this is how you're going to attack, like I said, the whole wreath when layering on flowers in a flat way. And this first section is only flat in a 2D until we get to the 3D section, and that is a different way of threading in the stems. But for stage 1, it's just flat. You'll also need another technique, which you will use with the date palm, and that is using a smaller piece of the string, wide string, and using like a needle and thread technique, going up through the top and then over. Now I know that that's there, but you might not. So I've threaded it through, and I've just come up either side of one of the wires, and I'm bread tying that off like so, and cutting that off. So you can just see a tiny bit, but you can always just massage that over, or at the end cover it with a little one of your straw flowers or something, but that is just when you're doing a single anchor point. Okay, they're in stage 1's techniques. So we're ready to make the wreath. So here's your wreath base. This is the wire base, and I like to choose one of the cross sections as my 12 o'clock. So we want to place on the date palm, so that's this one here, and we want to place that on really, so the final point part of it is really going down to about 2 o'clock on the other side. So I'm sitting it on top of the wreath, and I'm getting my piece of wide string like we talked about, and I'm just going to needle and thread that onto the base. And I can flip it over. And bread tying it off. And again, finding my 12 o'clock is there. And again, threading it through like a needle and thread. Flipping it over, finding the end pieces, and bread tying that off. And I can now snip that off. So there we have it. The purpose of that is just to start covering the base of the wreath. So it's really gone from up until really about 3 o'clock on the other side. So we're now going to use the bracken fern. Now it's up to you whether you keep a little bit of this aside or whether you use it all at once. In my case, I'm going to start using all of what I have here. And we've also got the gum and the gypsophila to add on to this first section. So we can use the whole stem sometimes, but other times we need to chop off certain bits. To do that, to make it clean, make sure it's a nice angle along the stem so it doesn't look like you've snipped it off. And we're just going to, like we talked about, layering it on top first. And we can also thread through the wire to give it a little bit more anchoring. So I'm sitting that on top. And I'm using my wire, which we talked about, finding the halfway point, laying it on top of my bracken fern, and then with using both hands, pulling that wire up, and again pulling it around the wide base, so the wide string, up and over, binding it on, and then bread tying it off. Okay. So as discussed before, this first section really is a little bit more of a 2D design than it is a 3D at this point. I'm going to add another piece of bracken fern, again realising that I want to use 2 parts, not just one, so I'm going to cut it into 2, and I'm layering that on top. So finding it really easy to layer on, see how it looks, and then tie off. Just gives you the confidence that you know you've got it in the right spot. And again, laying the string from the middle of the string over the top of the stems, pulling it nice and tight 3 or 4 times, tying it round, thread tying it off. I'm also going to choose to use a little bit of my gum, not all of it, because I'm going to keep that for other parts of my wreath. But I want to just add a little bit of that in. Again, I can really pull that nice and tight in there. Layering it on to see where I like it. Tying it off. That time I had a shorter piece, but I feel like the tension's tight enough that I've only wrapped it round once. So that's okay, that's tight enough. And I'm snipping these stems as I go. The gypsophila as well, you can use all of it now in one cluster, or if I could just use half if I like. Popping it into a nice little bunch, sitting it on top. Another piece of wide string. So really you're going to be getting used to that technique now. Binding over the top, underneath, and then wrapping around. So I've got my confidence up a bit now. I'm using the shorter pieces and that is tight enough. So once you've got an idea of the tension, how tight those stems need to be put on, you're good. Okay. So we're nearly at stage 2, but not quite yet. I just want to show you where you should be at. So if you can see there, you've got your date palm, your bracken, a little bit of gum, and just a little bit of my gypsophila. I'm now going to go into the second stage in a moment, and that's when we're not going to so much be laying flat on top of the base. We're also going to be threading from north to south. So we're actually going to go through the wire to create a little bit more dimension so things really pop out, because we have to remember that this is on a door. So when you're looking at it, you want it really to come out at you. Like, you want these elements to really have a lot of dimension. So we're going to talk about that in a moment. So we're up to phase or stage 2 now, and that's when we're really going to get a little bit fun and more 3D. So it's really where we're going to be threading the flowers from north to south. So I want you to be able to create that dimension that we've talked about. So I've just threaded that piece of hydrangea through, and I've got it where I want it. And now again, I'm going to tie it off. Like that. So this is the techniques section, so just showing you again. And also some of your hydrangeas might be in smaller pieces, so what you can do is pop them together like that, make a little bunch, get your wired string, again like discussed with the first version, sitting it on top, making a little posy, using that wide string to tie it together. Now these little guys are a little bit fragile, so you've just got to be nice and fine with the fingers. So you've got a little posy like that, and I'll just to show you, you'll thread it through the wires like so, and then around, wanting to get more of a 3D visual. And remembering these really can be poked and prodded and fluffed up as you go. So if you can see that there. So really wanting to get that dimension for this second phase. So that's one of the techniques, so threading through. Another technique is your pine cone. So here's a pine cone. This is, oh, hello. This is like a cotton covered wire. This one here, you could probably get about 1/3 of the wire, and you really at the last point that you can put that wire through the teeth. So really it's in the bottom 1/3-ish here, and you want to, I'm just going to show you, you want that to really get deep into the grooves, okay? and then you're going to braid tie that off. What we're doing here is creating a stem. Okay, so you should end up with something that looks like that. So you've tied it off, and again, like we talked about, north to south. So finding an appropriate spot where you like, where you're vibing it. Got to have some fun with this because, you know, I can't see you, you can see me. Now, threading up and through. So getting the wire, looping it underneath one of the wires, and then looping it around as many times as you like, just to really secure that tightly. Give it a bit of a squeeze. Really bind that on as tight as you can. If it flops, I don't really have any answers for you. Just joking. Hold the line. So look, you're going to find this throughout the process that if you put something somewhere and you think, I really didn't like that spot, take it out and do it again. There's no right or wrong with this, you know. I think don't be hard on yourself, especially if you haven't, you know, done this for 6 years running like some of you. And I'm going to try again and just get it in a little bit tighter there, allowing myself a little bit more wire to really pull tight with, threading it back through a couple of the wires, really pulling tight. So I want that to be really, really firm. So you might get a few little blisters in the process. Hopefully you didn't have a manicure before this because the nails aren't going to be looking as gorgeous afterwards. So we've got those techniques. So that threading from the top through to the bottom to create dimension. So if you can see that, you've got really things starting to move outwards now. So just like so. And the fabric that we're about to put on, that is also going to help with securing that pine cone, especially if it's one of the larger pine cones. So up to the fabric section. So you've got a beautiful piece of linen, and you've also got this gorgeous long line of calico. What I've done on my wreath is actually added a small piece to the top right hand corner. So I'm just going to show you how to tear this. You might decide you don't like that little feature. Don't worry, keep it as one, or cut it down into several strips. It's totally up to you how shabby chic you'd like it. This is going to be a bit loud. Okay, tearing it up. Okay, so that's it there. Now to tie on, I'm just going to show you this on a different part of the wreath for the purpose of just the technique. So I want you to, again, over the top first, back around, okay. You're going to get this piece of fabric, sit it on top on a slight angle over the top of the fold of the fabric underneath, holding both up and then tying very tightly. So you really want to get your back into it because, you know, you want that to look nice and full and fluffy. And that really is, will sit super securely if you really give it a pull. Okay, so that's the tying technique. Okay, there's more techniques to come. Are you ready? So you've got the 5-finger palm. These do not have to be put on all as one piece. In fact, I'm going to just tear this up into several pieces. I'm going to cut that off because that's just a really bulky piece we don't want. I don't want to cut it so far that I untwirl the cord. Someone has lovingly hand woven these, I'm sure. That's just phenomenal. So that's this one here. your wide string, and I want you just to thread it through one of those loops. Okay, and again, same technique we've been talking about the whole time, sitting that one on top, wrapping the string over the top, underneath, back over the top, and tying him off tight with that bread tie technique. So I'm hoping that all of these techniques are really starting to, you know, they're the same thing really over and over again, but we're using slightly different ways of using it each time. So there are more techniques. Again, gum nuts. These can be sometimes a little bit floppy, or you might find that they're quite stiff and they need a bit of support. So again, I've found same technique that we've been using all the time, on top, wrapping underneath, and wrapping on top. So I've really made myself a tiny posy, and if I want to add him on, again, either threading through or laying flat, but I've made a little posy before putting him on because they can sometimes flop around a little bit, so I find that creates a little bit more strength. So that's the gum nuts. And I think that's about it for this second stage section. So there's a few other little techniques for stage 3, but really it's just the pine cone, the threading through from top to bottom, and the tying on of these interesting little bits. Actually, one more thing, this is the beautiful palm, it's one of the palms. You can tear that one up, so they can be individuals as well. And to create this stem, again, you know, make a little, tie him off on the top so you feel like you've got him secure. These, however, could be even threaded through. So by threading through, and you can even thread him up again, underneath and through the frame, because that will really help secure it too. That can be tied on like so. Okay, so we're still making, so we're in the second section. I've just detailed the techniques for the second section, but we're now going to get straight into the making again. So you've listened to the techniques and now we're into the making. So like shown in the techniques, you're going to get your calico fabric, you're going to pop him over the top of the wreath base. And meanwhile, I've got a little bit of cotton on the chest. And then, so halfway, like so, like we discussed, fabric goes on top, getting off any little frayed sections. Now you've all got beautiful bespoke fabrics that are all in gorgeous neutral tones. Enjoy those, they're super special upholstery fabrics. Tying off really, really tightly. And you know, don't be overly precious, because this actually can be really massaged in as you go. So it's, you know, it's pretty easy to manoeuvre the shape of this once you've got it on. Okay, so I'm going to do another tie off just for good luck. Okay, fabric on. Gorgeous. And again, fluff, 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 fluff as much as you like. Always makes you feel a bit important when you fluff. All right, so next stage is on. This is the point where you add everything else except for those delicate items that we talked about before. So really, this is the creative freeform part. We can add these fantastic 5-finger palms. We can add the rest of the jip, some more gum. We can start using the Morrison. There's all sorts of beautiful things, and using that 3D technique I talked about. So we can get the stems, sitting them in, up through the top and down, and I can just bend those stems as I go too. So you really want your wide string nice and close, coming up, wrapping right around. And it's really, you know, it's really just rinse and repeat. So it's adding. Got those beautiful gum nuts. I really want to use the leaves on those. They'll all just dry out. This lot I'm actually going to thread through again and gently holding them in spots. I can even use that stem and flick him up and looping through. So there are ways of anchoring on these pieces too. So up and around. So I didn't really talk about this too much, but adding later is not that easy. So it's really better to really work out where you want, you know, hovering that flower or the stem on top. Yeah, I want it in that spot. Now I'm gonna, you know, go for gold. So I want a little bit more structure to that gum nut. Like I said before, I probably should have done the technique that I taught you. But I'm just getting another just single anchor point, like we did the date palm at the start, and tying that off just to give him a little bit more security in there. Now these snips are fine for all the wire cutting and everything like that. They're absolutely fine. I'm also going to anchor this at another couple of single anchor points, just to make sure it's really nice and firm. Okie dokie. Great, and again, layering on these beautiful bits of gum. You know, not flat, so much flat, but you know, using the shape of the stems to create a little bit of 3D as well is great. I notice I'm still going in the same direction. This time I'm getting a little bit more confident. I'm actually going to add more stems at once. Not just one bundle, but a few bundles. Now you can break things off too, don't need to always use your snips. Laying your string on top. And binding around. Also going to use the opportunity now to do a few more pine cones. And I also encourage you to hold up your wreath. Show your friends if you're working with them, or if you're working on your own, go and find a mirror and just hold it up and really work out those cross sections. You know, is there something focal here? Is there something focal here? Really start to look at your design. So this is where we're at with the design so far. And keeping in mind this flat section as well is where we're going to tie the ribbon to. So, and I'm going to keep working through here to create a lot of interest through that section. So adding in some of these beautiful wispy bits. Again, you can group things together, make those little posies and then pop them on. The string that was on there earlier. Making a little posy, you know, creating a little bit of length. Tying him on, and remember the pine cones can cover, you know, some of these things that are sticking out too. Another one of my thick wires here. If any of you are into any spraying, but you can get yourself some lovely coppers and silvers and golds from Baldock's or somewhere like that if you're looking to spray any of your pine cones. Again, wrapping that on really tightly. I'm going to give you some time now to just keep working on your wreath and adding clusters, adding different varieties. This is where I'm up to now, so I've added a few beautiful wispy sections. And then I'm going to keep going, and I'm going to keep working my way back up to the top. So there we are. And again, referring to mine here too. And again, having a look from overhead. So this is the really great part, because you are nearly finished your beautiful design. So while I've been gone, but you've been still going, I have finished off the wreath using all my elements, using the 3D, using the 2D, really mixing and matching the rest of the elements, and now I get to use the hot glue gun. So if your glue gun wasn't hot before, make sure it is. It takes a good 10 minutes to get really, really hot. So again, thinking about that cross section that we talked about, so when I'm adding on all these fun little elements, where are the hero spots going to be? But before I get into that, I'm just going to show you where I'm up to, so you can see from overhead there and from here. What I want to show you is that little piece of calico that we ripped off earlier. I'm just going to tie that at about the kind of 1, 2 o'clock section, and that's just going to tie off anything that might be a little bit loose, or, you know, just finish him off. And just what I can also make here is just a lovely little bow too, but it's totally up to you. This is your free form section. You might decide to bow, you might decide to cut off a little tie so it's not too obvious, or you might not want to use it at all and use it in a different section of your wreath, and that is totally up to you. But what I'm kind of showing you here too is that this is my top right and bottom left. They've both got something going on. My bottom right's got the nuts and the Morrison and a few dangly gorgeous 5-finger palms. And before you got here, I just added in a little bit of my bleached fern with the hot glue gun, but that's balancing off this section. So we're really getting something going now. And you might have noticed I also chopped off a little bit of fern. So you know, what I've been saying is hold it up, show your neighbour, look in the mirror, you know, because you really want to see how the balance is going. So I found that there was, you know, a little bit too much bracken fern in there, so I just nipped some off and I've put it in. And little bits like this that I really can't get my fingers in tight, I'm like, well, why don't I just hot glue that in? So I can get my hot glue. I want to make a nice pool of glue. And I want to use the glue on an area where there's a bit of foliage. I don't want to glue straight onto the wire. I want to make sure that my stem is clean, so not too much on the stem, because we want to be able to drive it into the hot glue. And look at that, I've been able to add another element of something that I just didn't need up here. So with your snips, you can really just gently go in and find little bits that aren't, if they're not really doing anything in the design, chop it off. Pop a little bit of glue, you know, I'm just gluing here into the gum nuts, sticking it on top of the gum nut. Anything that's got a nice solid bit to glue onto. I've got a tiny bit of the beautiful bleached hydrangea left, so I'm looking here, I've got my hydrangea here. I think I want a little bit more white in here, so I'm gonna just glue onto that Morrison, that'll be fine. Sticking that in, cutting those stems super short too. And look at that, it's already lifting the colour into this area. I've got my gorgeous paper daisies, so I'm just randomly going to use the rest of my ingredients as I feel fit. And you know, just sit it on there and see how it feels. I do find it's quite nice if these elements are clustered together. It does create a bit more impact. So you can put a couple of smaller with a couple of larger. You know, I'm holding those there, getting a bit of dimension. Now the one thing you want to do too, this is going to be tricky, if I hold that up, I want to make sure that they're facing outways. I don't want them to sit too flat in that they're getting hidden within the wreath. So I'm happy with that. So I'm happy with the positioning. Get my hot glue in there. Give it a good 3 or 4 pumps. You know, it has to be a fairly big lot of it to get that stuck on. I think this is almost going to glue on to the other two. How beautiful. Love it. So top right, bottom left, I think I want a few over here just to balance out what I've got going on at the top. Gluing straight onto that Morrison's, no problem. Got a little stem on that straw flower too, which will help thread it in. So this really, you'll really start to see your wreath coming to life now. Got a little double headed here. And going in tight. Got a couple of glue sticks in your pack if you've bought a glue stick. So you've got around about 7 of these beautiful straw flowers. So, you know, evenly spread them out. Gorgeous. I want to put a little bit more of this beautiful fern in. I'm going to break mine up. Some of you might decide to keep it in one whole piece. But again, testing how I like it. Where is it going to sit nicely? You know, do I want to cluster it all in one spot? And that's the beauty of holding it in this position before gluing it. So fine and beautiful. Where are we at? The glue's pretty quick to set, so we're looking pretty gorgeous. Now, what I didn't talk about at the start, because it was missing from my kit, but you'll all have a tiny little piece of that Strelitzia as well, which is just a beautiful Western Australian native. This little one, I can actually, you know, there's little bits like this that you can add in at the end. Be careful not to break him down. In fact, I might even hot glue him in. And the other thing I didn't use, because I just wasn't, didn't use it. And you might find there's certain elements that you don't use like this, which is the pussy willow, because they're quite a sticky, straight element. But if I cut them down short, again, I can actually use them for more of that 3D impact. Again, putting a bit of hot glue in. You know, as long as it's touching that glue, all good. You can take the little husk off, which will reveal the little beautiful soft bud. Any final little gaps, and feel free to add your little final bits of foliage. Again, tying it off. Any little loose gum nuts that fall off, feel free to hot glue those ones in as well. your cedar roses too. These are a beautiful little nut from a pine tree. You can just sit on that bit of gum, and that helps to hide the wire too underneath. Okay. Alright, so we've got one final little fun trinket. These are the little nuts. And I've got some copper wire. So halfway down the length, holding the little nut, winding the copper, tying it off with that bread tie like we talked about earlier on throughout all our techniques. So it should look something like that. Sitting the ribbon over the top halfway down the length of the ribbon, and we can just bread tie that off again. Beautiful, and you can leave that wire sticking out nice and fun. And this could be tied on to anywhere on the wreath really. Hook it over one of the stems. Let it hang. Beautiful. So use this time to just quietly fill in all the little holes. I'm going to double up a couple of those little beautiful little cedar nuts there. You know, you could hang one of these through the middle of the wreath. It's up to you. Just have a play. Okay, so we are at the final stage of finishing the wreath, and some of you have purchased a wreath hook, and that basically you could still put your satin ribbon as a bow, but you won't be hanging from the door with your ribbon, you'll be hanging with the hook. But if you've got ribbon and just ribbon and no hook, you're going to do a slip knot. So over the top, folding the ribbon in half, through the hole, tying it up. Beautiful. Pretty happy, yeah. Really good. So there's your ribbon. Some gorgeous little trinkets hanging from the bottom. And that's my final product. Now each and every one of you will have a totally different design, which is such a beautiful part of this process. And I would love you, of course, to put them on social media and tag our DIY wreath kit. But really, mostly at the end of the day, I just hope this is a really special time for you in gearing up to Christmas and all the love and special times that brings. And especially, as I said, out of any other year, may this bring you a really special time of retreat and time to just focus on something beautiful. I hope that you had the most beautiful afternoon or evening with your friends, or time out for yourself doing this wonderful creative experience. And what better time but to spend time just winding down before the Christmas season, because as we all know, it can be fairly intense. And I suppose I'm also wanting to reach out here and just say that if anyone's received one of these that is somewhere where they can't get out to see their family or friends with lockdown, I just hope that this is a really special time of meditation for you. So this is my final product. It took me a little bit to get the ribbon that I wanted to make sure that everything was balancing out as it should be. I'm going to hold it up for you now. Just like that. So you've got all your little hot glued pieces, and I'm hold it up once more for you to see all the elements in play. Fluffing the fabric if need. So Merry Christmas to you all, and I look forward to seeing your final products on social media. Thank you so much for being a part of this new experience of our Christmas wreath for 2020.